Welcome to the Health Headliner podcast by Tudu Digital. Our content is informational only and not medical advice. Please consult your provider. Now, let's dive into today's headlines.
All right, picture this, you've got security guards, right, protecting your home, and all of a sudden the intruder, the person breaking in, disarms them, takes away their tools.
Wild.
That sounds kind of crazy, right? Like, how does that even happen?
Does it?
But you know what? Something very similar is happening inside our bodies when we're talking about cancer, especially with a common type of blood cancer known as chronic lymphocytic leukemia.
Yeah, it's pretty fascinating stuff.
So chronic lymphocytic leukemia, it actually manipulates our own defense system, our immune system. It's almost like it outsmarts it.
Yeah, it's like it knows the playbook.
Exactly. So today we're doing a deep dive into some recent research that is looking into this, and it's from the Amsterdam University Medical Centers and the Moffitt Cancer Center.
Great institutions.
And what they've been doing is they're trying to figure out how these chronic lymphocytic leukemia cells actually create like an energy crisis.
An energy shortage.
Yes, in these really crucial immune cells called T-cells.
Yeah, like the workhorses of our immune system.
Yeah, exactly. So we've got a few sources we're going to be looking at today. We've got a health news article that kind of broke down this discovery, right? But we've also got the actual scientific paper that was published in Cellular and Molecular Immunology.
Yeah.
And to kind of round things out, we're also going to look at some related research that's been published in Blood Journal and Blood Advances.
All right, so a nice broad perspective on the topic.
Exactly. So really our goal today is to understand, okay, how is this energy being hijacked, you know? And what does that mean for future cancer treatments? And in particular, we're going to talk about a type of immunotherapy called chimeric antigen receptor T-cell therapy, or CR T-cell therapy.
Right.
So, a lot of past research on immunotherapy is focused on just helping our immune system recognize hey, these cancer cells, they're bad,
Right.
Get them out of here. But this research team, they kind of took a different approach, didn't they?
Yeah, they did. Instead of, like you said, focusing on the recognition, they really went into how are the T cells managing their energy, especially, in these patients who have chronic lymphocytic leukemia. And what they found, and it's the first time it's been shown, is that when the T cells come in direct contact with these leukemia cells, they actually lose a lot of their energy.
Wow.
They get depleted.
So that sounds like a huge problem, right? I mean, T cells are just so important for our immune system. They're like the front line when it comes to attacking and eliminating abnormal cells like cancer cells. So if a healthy T cell, right, is going into action, it's got to be prepared for battles, so to speak. What kind of energy does it need?
Well, it's really interesting. When a healthy T cell identifies a threat, whether it's a virus or a cancer cell, they have a huge increase in their uptake of cholesterol and fats.
Okay.
So think of it, you're fueling up before a big race or something like that.
Okay, go load up.
And this fuel, it's essential for them to be able to multiply, get lots of these T cells and then attack and sustain their fight.
So basically, we think of ourselves as these tiny little things, but they're machines, little biological machines, and they need the right kind of fuel to run.
Yeah.
So what's the problem then when these T cells, they come across chronic lymphocytic leukemia cells? It sounds like there's a disruption in this whole refueling process.
Exactly. So what they found is that increase in cholesterol and fat uptake just doesn't happen when they encounter these leukemia cells.
Wow.
So they're not getting what they need.
It's like they're showing up to the fight and someone stole their lunch. Basically.
Yeah.
They're like, wait a minute, I can't do this.
Yeah.
So that makes sense then, right? Why the immune system would have a hard time fighting this particular cancer, it's almost like these cancer cells are creating a little energy crisis that weakens the immune response right where it needs to be strong. Now, the news article mentioned mitochondria, which are, often called the powerhouses of the cell.
Yeah.
So where did they fit into this whole energy picture?
Well, another study that they did, and this was published in Blood Advances, they looked at the mitochondria within the T cells from the patients with chronic lymphocytic leukemia. And they found that these energy-generating organelles, they were damaged.
Oh, no.
They can't function properly.
Wow.
If you have a car with a damaged engine, it might start, but it's not going to run very well.
It's a lemon.
Yeah.
So we've got this lack of fuel uptake, and we've got these broken down powerhouses, the mitochondria. So what did the researchers do? I mean, it sounds like a pretty dire situation. The article mentioned that they tried to somehow rejuvenate the T cells.
Yeah, so knowing that energy was a big problem, They used a drug that's already out there, and it's known to kind of affect how cells manage their energy. And they wanted to basically give the T cells a little bit of a boost.
Okay, did it work?
Hmm.
Did they actually manage to, like, give those T cells the jumpstart they needed?
Well, the results were pretty good, especially with CAR T-cell therapy.
Okay.
They found that this drug that affects the energy management actually made CAR T-cell therapy a lot more effective, at least in the lab.
That's fascinating. Now, for our listeners who may not know, what exactly is CAR T-cell therapy, and why is this improvement such a big deal, specifically when we're talking about chronic lymphocytic leukemia?
So with CAR T-cell therapy, what they do is they take the patient's T-cells and they modify them genetically.
Okay.
So they give them special receptors on their surface. And these receptors are designed to recognize and attach to cancer cells.
It's like a homing device almost.
Exactly. So then they put these modified T-cells back into the patient, and hopefully those T-cells will go and destroy those cancer cells. Okay.
Now, this therapy has worked incredibly well with some blood cancers, like acute B-cell leukemia.
Right.
But for chronic lymphocytic leukemia, it's been less effective. It only works in about 15% of patients, and it's also really expensive.
Okay. So not ideal.
No.
And I mean, 15%, that's a pretty low success rate, especially when you consider the cost and the potential side effects of such a complex therapy. So, I mean, the fact that this energy drug could potentially increase that success rate, that's a pretty big development.
Yeah.
So let's zoom out a little bit, beyond just chronic lymphocytic leukemia and CAR T-cell therapy. What are the broader implications of this research?
Well, the hope is that this discovery will make T-cell therapy more of a possibility, for patients with chronic lymphocytic leukemia. But I think even more important is that this suggests that we could be looking at energy as a way to fight other cancers as well.
That's a good point.
Because we see this in a lot of different cancers. The immune cells just have trouble mounting a good attack and keeping it going. Right, they just kind of peter out.
Yeah.
They run out of steam.
Exactly. So if we can address this energy issue within T cells in general, it could make immunotherapy a lot more effective for a wider range of cancers.
So it's like we're identifying a weak spot.
Yeah.
That a lot of different types of cancers might be exploiting. Now, the article mentions some new treatment options that are being researched right now.
Mm-hmm.
So what can we expect on the horizon, based on what we know now? How can we translate this knowledge into something that can actually help patients?
Well, the researchers are looking at ways to modify T cells genetically.
Oh, okay.
The idea is to make them resistant to this disruption that chronic lymphocytic leukemia causes.
Okay.
So basically, they want to make sure that the T cells can get fuel, that their mitochondria are working properly.
Okay.
Because if they can do that, then you have a stronger, more persistent immune response that's able to fight the cancer.
So instead of just temporarily boosting them up, you're trying to kind of re-engineer them a little bit to be more hardcore, basically.
Exactly.
Hey, I can handle this.
Yeah.
I can deal with this energy crisis.
Exactly.
Interesting. Now, what about this combination therapy?
Yeah.
I know that that's a big area of research in cancer treatment in general.
Yeah.
So are they looking at anything like that in this case?
There's a trial going on. It's an international trial. It's called the HOVON study.
Okay.
And early results are promising. So what they're doing is combining a drug that basically reduces the number of leukemia cells with another treatment that attracts T cells to the cancer. So the idea is if you reduce the amount of leukemia cells first, it's not such a burden on the immune system.
Oh, okay.
So the T cells, they're not going to get so overwhelmed, and then they can work a lot better.
So basically shrink the problem before you send in the troops.
Yeah, exactly.
Make sure they're not outnumbered, 1,000 to 1.
Yeah, exactly.
Now, all this is super interesting and it's very exciting, but it's important to be, realistic, right?
Yeah.
So what are some of the limitations of this research?
That's a good point. The article focuses on the good stuff, the exciting findings.
Yeah.
But to really get into the limitations, we'd have to look at the full scientific papers.
Right, of course.
And we don't have all of that here. But one thing to remember is that early research, it always needs more studies.
Of course.
And it needs to be tested on people.
Right.
In clinical trials. Because what happens in the lab isn't always how it works out in the real world.
Right. It's always more complicated when you're dealing with a whole person, not just cells in a dish.
Exactly. And they mentioned that the energy drug improved CAR T-cell therapy, but they didn't really explain, how that was shown.
Okay.
Was it in the lab? Was it with animals? Was it with a small number of patients?
Yeah.
So we'd have to look at the cellular and molecular immunology paper to get all the details.
And the H of On study, that was just preliminary, right?
Yeah, those were just the first results.
Got
So
it.
the study's still going on,
Okay.
and they need more data to see if it really works long term. And of course, if it's safe.
Yeah, I mean, that's always the big question. Early promise is great, but it's the long-term effects that really matter.
Absolutely.
So the article quoted a couple of the researchers involved in this study.
Yeah.
What were their main takeaways?
So Arnon Kater from Amsterdam University Medical Centers, he highlighted two big things. First, healthy T-cells. They increase their fuel intake, like we said, after they identify their target.
Right.
And the second thing, this doesn't happen with the leukemia cells.
Oh, right.
So he's saying this shows how important this interaction between the cancer cells and the immune cells is.
Yep.
It's all about metabolism. And if you can get the energy back to the T cells, it could make treatment a lot more effective.
So that's basically the whole idea of this energy hijacking.
Yeah.
Like the leukemia cells are cutting off the power supply. Now, what did the expert from Moffitt Cancer Center have to say?
So Javier Pinilla-Ibarz, he said he's hopeful that this will lead to better CRT cell therapy for chronic lymphocytic leukemia patients.
Okay.
But he also thinks this could be applied to other cancers where the immune system is struggling.
So both experts seem to agree that this energy disruption is a big deal and that it opens up a lot of possibilities for new treatments.
Right.
Whether it's, modifying the T cells or using combination therapies, a whole new way of looking at how to fight this type of cancer.
Definitely. It's not just about getting the immune system to see the cancer. It's about making sure it has the energy to fight.
So in this deep dive, we've really looked at how chronic lymphocytic leukemia basically hijacks the energy supply of these T cells.
Yeah.
And it's a pretty fundamental vulnerability that this cancer is exploiting.
Right.
But the good news is that there's a lot of exciting research going on. So I want to ask our listeners, what questions do you have about this? How do you think other cancers might be manipulating the body's defenses? And what kind of research do you think holds the most promise for dealing with this energy crisis in immune cells?
Those are great questions.
If you want to learn more, we encourage you to look into CAR T-cell therapy and, all the research that's being done on how we can reprogram the metabolism of immune cells to fight cancer.
There's definitely a lot to learn.
Well, that was our look at this really fascinating area of research with huge implications for the future of cancer treatment. We hope you got a lot out of it. And please join us next time for another deep dive into the world of research.
Thanks for tuning in to the Health Headliner podcast by To-Do Digital. Like and subscribe for more health news and breakthroughs. Stay healthy and informed. See you next time.